Hey guys, tonight we set sail across a stretch of ocean so wide it practically giggles at your sense of direction. You're standing barefoot on a woven canoe deck, the smell of salt water mixing with warm banana leaves and the faint funk of fermented taro. Above you, a sky so clear you feel like you're floating between galaxies. Below you, nothing but the deep, endless blue. Welcome to Polynesia, where your ancestors didn't just explore the Pacific, they straight up conquered it with zero GPS, and, somehow, full bellies. You're here not just to survive this 1,000-mile voyage. You're expected to do it with style. That means no catching scurvy halfway through, no food poisoning from suspicious octopus, and no hangry crew members. Which brings us to tonight's question. How did ancient Polynesians keep themselves alive and thriving while sailing weeks, or even months, across the largest ocean on Earth? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like knowing what corner of the world we are gently falling asleep in tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your canoe is loaded. Not just with crew, paddles, and the occasional carved idol watching you from the stern, but with food. Carefully packed, curated, and fussed over by elders and navigators alike. The voyage might take 30 days. Or 70. Or, however long it takes until we spot an island and hope it's not volcanic. And since fast food won't be invented for another 1,000 years, everything you need to eat has to come with you. Or be fished from the sea. Preferably not involving trial and error, with glowing sea creatures. In the center of the canoe, bundles of taro root are piled in woven baskets. It's earthy, filling, and just bland enough that you won't get sick of it until day 6. You've also got bananas, lots of them. Not the bright yellow kind from supermarkets, but stubby cooking bananas that taste like a dense, chewy cross between a sweet potato and a plantain. They are picked green so they'll ripen slowly during the voyage. Bananas, nature's ticking time bombs of flavor, and of course, there's breadfruit. This large, bumpy green orb looks like something that fell off a jungle tree and lost a fight with gravity. You roast it over hot coals until the inside turns into a warm, carby dough. A single breadfruit can feed several crew members for a day, and with a little practice, you can eat it without burning your hands or eyebrows, but just loading food isn't enough. You have to store it. Waterproofing and preservation are critical. Spoiled food at sea. That's not just gross, it's mutiny bait. So enter the leaf wrapping technique. You wrap everything, taro paste, fish, meat, in layers of banana or tea leaves, sometimes tied with coconut fiber. It's nature's version of Tupperware. You're also bringing fermented versions of your favorite staples. A taro paste called poi, for example, starts as a sticky mash and slowly ferments into a tangy, purplish goo. If you're imagining a vat of lukewarm yogurt someone left in the sun, you're not wrong, but it's nutritious, keeps for ages, and doesn't judge your lack of seasoning options. Besides, after 2 weeks at sea, everything tastes like poi anyway. One clever trick. Drying and salting fish before departure. Salted fish wrapped in leaves can last weeks, especially if you don't mind a little chew. Or a lot of chew. Think jerky, but fishier. Historians still argue whether Polynesians developed their salt curing methods independently or borrowed them through early contact with Micronesian or Melanesian cultures. Either way, salted fish became a voyage staple, equal parts food and challenge to your jaw muscles. But here's the kicker. Polynesian voyagers didn't just sail with enough food to feed themselves. They brought plants. Breadfruit saplings. Sugarcane stalks. Even taro corms packed in damp bundles. It wasn't just about survival, it was about colonizing. When you landed on that distant speck of land, you'd plant your food right away. It's kind of like moving to a new apartment and immediately assembling your IKEA garden. There's even a word for this process. Transported landscapes. It means entire ecosystems, curated by humans, stuffed into canoes. You're not just bringing dinner, you're bringing farming, now, because Polynesians didn't write their own histories until much later. A lot of this is pieced together by archaeologists, linguists, and anthropologists arguing over the remains of burned breadfruit seeds. But the general consensus: they knew what they were doing. Food wasn't an afterthought, it was the core of the voyage. The literal fuel, and yes, sometimes it ran out. You had to ration. You had to fish. You had to eat stuff you didn't want to describe out loud. But on the whole, if your voyage was planned right, you made it. Well fed, only slightly sunburned, and ready to plant a taro patch. Let's take a moment to admire the audacity here. Sailing thousands of miles using stars and wind, guided by chance and memory, and still managing to pack a balanced diet. Honestly, you can't even go on a weekend trip without forgetting your charger and 3 essential toiletries. As you drift off, imagine yourself curled beside a pile of woven baskets, the soft sway of the canoe beneath you, a breadfruit still warm from roasting nearby. The sky above is clear, your stomach is full, and tomorrow, you might spot land, or just another dazzling horizon. Either way, you've got enough poi to make it another week. You wake up to the creaking lull of your canoe slicing through the swells. The sun is up, high and hot, and the air smells faintly of salt and singed banana skin. Breakfast? That's up to you, and the ripeness of the banana bundles tied to the central mast. Some are still firm and green, waiting for their moment. Others are spotted, fragrant, practically begging to be mashed into a paste or thrown into the coals. Either way, this is no tropical smoothie break. This is survival, wrapped in fruit. Bananas weren't just a snack on these voyages, they were strategy. Cultivated in multiple varieties, including the starchy maie and the more dessert-like ayafata, these bananas were chosen for their longevity and staggered ripening. You didn't want everything going soft and mushy on day 5. By selecting bunches in various stages of development, Voyagers had a rolling buffet that lasted for weeks. A kind of primitive meal plan. Without the app, then there's breadfruit. Big, green, and covered in hexagonal patterns, like someone asked a pineapple to bulk up. Breadfruit trees don't grow on canoes, obviously, but their fruits were loaded on board in dozens. The trick was to harvest them just before they ripened. That way, they could be cooked gradually over the course of the trip. Roasted breadfruit is dense, slightly sweet, and surprisingly satisfying. You pull off the crisp outer skin, dig into the steaming center with your fingers, and, if you're lucky, pair it with some dried fish, or a bit of fermented coconut cream. It's basically the Polynesian version of comfort food. And when it starts to ferment, well, you just pretend it's aged. Adds depth, right? One of the unsung heroes here is the humble sweet potato, or kumara, as it's known in many Polynesian languages. Now, this root wasn't native to Polynesia, it actually comes from South America. But somehow, it ended up planted all across the Pacific Islands, thousands of miles from its origin. Historians still argue whether Polynesians sailed to the South American coast and brought it back, or whether it floated its way across the ocean on its own. Either way, it's here, it's tasty, and it can last for ages in a canoe without whining. Sweet potatoes were carried as tubers, hardy, starchy, and practically indestructible. You could bake them, mash them, or just chew them raw if you were feeling impatient. They didn't need fancy storage. Just a cool, dry spot and a little patience. Also, bonus, they helped fight off that pesky little thing called scurvy. So next time you're gnawing on one like a portable chew toy, just remember, it's literally saving your life. Let's not forget taro, already introduced in section 1, but it deserves a second round. This stuff was foundational. Taro wasn't just food, it was identity. Villages were built around taro patches. Families passed down corms like heirlooms. And if you dared to overcook it or insult its slimy texture, you might find yourself demoted from paddler to, well, sea anchor. taro came in many varieties, each with its own quirks. Some were better roasted, others perfect for poi, the fermented paste that stuck to everything and somehow never got boring. And when taro was unavailable, you didn't panic, you adapted. That was the whole point. Every canoe had its plan B routes. Now picture the canoe. No coolers. No fridges. Just layers of leaf-wrapped starch, stacked carefully to avoid bruising, wilting, or spontaneous disintegration. It's a game of edible Tetris. You're managing airflow, shade, moisture levels, and the occasional rat who thinks it's found a VIP buffet seat. Spoiler: rats didn't always stay off the menu either. Of course, eating the same 3 starchy foods every day does things to a person. Spirits drop. Energy dips. Jokes become sadder. So to keep morale up, some crews cooked their staples in clever combos, mashing banana into sweet potato, wrapping taro paste with a sliver of dried fish, or even stuffing young breadfruit with chunks of leftover roast. If you're thinking of a Polynesian hot pocket, you're not far off. There's something poetic about how this food wasn't flashy. No spices. No sauces. Just earth-grown essentials, designed to keep you steady under the sun and sharp in your navigation. You weren't eating for joy, you were eating to stay functional. And yet, the moment you bite into a warm piece of banana mash paired with roasted breadfruit, it hits different. Because it's earned. And then there's the wild card, sugarcane. Long stalks tucked alongside the main food stores, chewed on for a quick burst of energy, or just something to do. It's the ancient Polynesian answer to gum and energy bars rolled into one. You strip off the skin, bite into the fibrous core, and suck out the juice. Instant morale booster. No espresso required, the sheer volume of food is staggering. You're not just feeding yourself, you're feeding the team. Your canoe might hold 20 people. Multiply daily rations by weeks at sea, and you realize, the real miracle isn't the sailing. It's the packing, and yet, this wasn't chaos. It was a system. Elders knew how many bundles of bananas to take, which types of taro to harvest, how many breadfruit to roast in advance. There were rules. Schedules. Preferences. One theory even suggests early Polynesian voyaging societies had food specialists, people whose entire job was provisioning and preserving. Imagine telling your parents you majored in canoe lunch prep, and having it be the most respected gig around. So tonight, as you drift through this mental canoe pantry, imagine reaching for a perfectly ripened banana. The wind nudges your sail, the waves tap gently against the hull, and somewhere behind you, the sun dips lower toward the edge of the ocean. Your belly's full. Your stash is holding strong. And you've got at least another week before you have to consider fishing. Let's enjoy this moment of food security. Because fermented surprises are coming. The morning sun is still warm on your skin, but now there's a curious scent in the air, a faint tang that tickles your nose and whispers, "What's that smell?" Welcome to the world of fermentation, a crafty Polynesian trick that turns perfectly good food into something, well, let's call it acquired taste. Fermentation is like the original slow cooker, but with more mystery and a higher chance of accidental science experiments. You're not just preserving food here, you're transforming it. Taro turns into poi, breadfruit into a tangy mash, and coconut water into something fizzier than your morning soda. It's a kind of edible alchemy that extends the life of your rations and adds a probiotic punch. The downside? Sometimes it smells a little like sweaty socks. Take poi, for example. The sticky taro paste you met earlier isn't just mashed and left alone. No, it's carefully prepared, packed tightly into large bowls or baskets, and then left to ferment in the warmth of the canoe or coastal huts. Over days, naturally occurring bacteria and yeasts break down the starches, producing that distinctive sour flavor and smooth texture. You might wrinkle your nose the first time you taste it, but poi is a staple, nutritious, filling, and surprisingly versatile. And hey, when you're miles from land, Sour is better than spoiled. There's also a curious fermented coconut beverage called okolehau in some regions, though more common in Hawaiian traditions, which you definitely wouldn't want to sip if you're after hydration. It's a potent liquor made by fermenting coconut sap, kind of like island moonshine. Perfect for ceremonies and celebrations, less so for keeping your sea legs steady. You might wonder why Polynesians relied so heavily on fermentation. It's because fresh food at sea is a ticking clock. Bananas get mushy. Breadfruit rots. Fish turns slimy. But fermented foods are stable. They can last for weeks, even months, without refrigeration. This gave voyagers a reliable food source when their fresh supplies inevitably ran out. Historians still argue whether Polynesian fermentation techniques developed independently or were influenced by contact with Southeast Asian cultures, where similar methods are common. Either way, it's a testament to human ingenuity, turning a potential disaster, rotting food, into a culinary tradition that also aids digestion and boosts nutrition. And here's the weird part: fermentation didn't just save food. It created new flavors and textures that became culturally significant. Fermented taro, breadfruit, and coconut weren't just practical, they were revered, almost sacred in some contexts. Eating poi wasn't just survival, it was a connection to ancestors and the earth. The fermentation process wasn't limited to roots and fruits. Some Polynesian cultures fermented fish and seafood, wrapping them in leaves and burying them underground or in pits lined with stones to ferment slowly. The result? A pungent, salty delicacy that modern noses might find challenging. But for voyagers, it was a powerful protein source that lasted well beyond fresh catch limits. Speaking of pits, Polynesians were masters of underground fermentation techniques. They'd dig holes lined with heated stones, earth ovens known as imu, where wrapped food could cook slowly or ferment, depending on how long it stayed buried. This method was essential for preparing large quantities of food before departure, ensuring the crew had something hearty to eat even on the roughest days. And if you think all this fermented food sounds a little risky, remember that your gut microbiome evolved alongside these traditional diets. Fermented foods introduce beneficial bacteria that help your digestion and immune system. Basically, they are probiotics before the term was cool. Of course, a few unlucky batches might have caused the odd upset stomach, but hey, what voyage is without a little gamble? One quirky tidbit: in some islands, you might find fermented breadfruit wrapped in banana leaves left to age until it develops a bluish mold, think blue cheese, but tropical. The aroma is strong enough to clear a canoe, but locals consider it a delicacy, balancing rich, funky flavors with the sweetness of the fruit. Not exactly your average picnic snack, the balance between fresh and fermented foods was key. When the sea was calm, and the crew had time, they'd feast on fresh fish and roasted roots. When conditions worsened, and supplies dwindled, they'd turn to fermented staples, their flavors deepening with time. It's a rhythm of anticipation, patience, and acceptance, qualities any seasoned sailor knows well. You also start to notice the textures and temperatures of your food. Fermented poi is cool and smooth on your tongue, contrasting with the warmth of roasted breadfruit, or the chewy bite of dried fish. This variety was crucial to keep eating from becoming a chore. No one wants mush for breakfast every day, even if it's nutritionally solid. The fermentation methods you carry in your canoe are also a kind of insurance policy. You never know when a storm will delay your arrival, or a fishing attempt will fail. Having food that can safely age gives you flexibility. And flexibility is survival when you're at the mercy of the ocean's moods. At the same time, there's a cultural debate about how fermentation influenced Polynesian health and taste preferences. Some scholars argue that the widespread use of fermented foods contributed to relatively low rates of certain diseases, while others suggest it may have limited dietary variety and contributed to occasional digestive issues. As always with ancient diets, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Still, it's impressive to think that, while most of the world was still relying on fresh or dried foods, Polynesian voyagers had already mastered the art of fermentation as a staple survival strategy. That slightly funky smell wafting through the canoe. It's not just food, it's history, science, and a little bit of magic all wrapped in banana leaves. As you lean back, tasting a bit of fermented breadfruit, with a pinch of sea salt, you realize something important. The voyage isn't just about the destination. It's about the journey, and every bite along the way. By now, you've probably noticed the sea isn't just a liquid highway, it's also a pantry. Fishing was not merely a backup plan, it was an essential, ongoing task during those long voyages. Fresh fish could mean the difference between a bland, carbohydrate-heavy diet and one rich in protein and fat. But catching fish on a rocking canoe in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, that's a whole other skill set, with its own set of challenges, and, let's be honest, moments of frustration. Your fishing gear is simple but effective: a few hand-carved wooden spears, hooks made from bone or shell, and nets woven from coconut fiber. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have a throw net, but that requires calm seas and steady hands. And, of course, the patient art of freediving when the canoe is anchored near an island or reef. Fish wasn't just any fish either. Polynesians targeted a variety of species suited to different fishing methods. Reef fish like parrotfish and triggerfish could be speared or netted near shore, while pelagic fish like tuna and mahi-mahi demanded more daring open-sea tactics. Here's a quirky tidbit: the famous fish poison technique. In some Polynesian cultures, certain plants containing natural toxins were crushed and released into shallow reef pools, temporarily stunning the fish without killing them. This made them easier to catch by hand or nets. It's like a prehistoric fishing hack, though a bit frowned upon today for obvious ecological reasons. Historians still debate how widespread and sustainable this method was, but it's a fascinating glimpse into resourcefulness. Fishing wasn't just about food, it was also a social ritual. The crew's morale could hinge on a successful catch, especially after days of starch-heavy rations. So a big tuna haul was cause for celebration, with stories told, songs sung, and sometimes even small ceremonies to honor the ocean's generosity. When you're miles from land, these moments count. Preserving fish for long periods was crucial too. Fresh fish spoil quickly, especially in tropical heat. That's where drying, smoking, and salting techniques shine. You'd hang fish over smoldering fires or in the breeze on makeshift racks, slowly dehydrating them until they could survive the journey without refrigeration. Sometimes fish were crushed, mixed with coconut cream, and wrapped tightly in leaves to ferment, creating another form of preserved protein. There's an amusing note here. Some dried fish ended up so tough that chewing them required a Neolympic jaw workout. You might joke that your ancestors had teeth of steel, or just no choice but to tough it out. This isn't snack food, it's sustenance. Another interesting aspect is the knowledge of fish behavior and ocean currents. Experienced navigators and fishers knew where to find the best fishing spots, even while underway. They could read signs like bird flight patterns or changes in water color, predicting where schools of fish might be feeding. It's a skill passed down orally through generations, a mix of science and intuition, and of course, you have to be careful. The ocean's generosity isn't limitless. Overfishing, reef damage, and seasonal variations mean your success might fluctuate wildly. Historians still argue how ancient Polynesian societies managed sustainable fishing practices over centuries. Some evidence suggests they had informal taboos or closed seasons to protect fish stocks, showing early environmental awareness. Fishing also brought risks. Sharks and other predators lurked nearby, sometimes drawn by the scent of bait. Voyagers had to be alert, balancing hunger with safety. Imagine trying to spear a fish while a curious shark circles beneath you. Thrilling, terrifying, and probably the origin of some very nervous sea shanties. Despite the challenges, fresh fish added vital nutrients to the diet, especially omega-3 fatty acids crucial for brain function and heart health. Combined with the starch-heavy staples, fish created a surprisingly balanced nutritional profile that helped voyagers maintain strength and focus. By late afternoon, after a successful fishing session, you might find the crew gathered around the fire roasting fish alongside breadfruit or taro. The smoky aroma blends with ocean air, creating a feast out of simple ingredients. It's a reminder that even the vast Pacific can provide abundance if you know where and how to look. So, as you imagine yourself holding a freshly caught fish, skin crisped over an open flame, think about the delicate balance between ocean and human. A relationship built on respect, knowledge, and a shared desire to survive and thrive. It's a dance as old as the waves themselves. The sun dips low on the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the rippling water, and your canoe sways gently with the rhythm of the Pacific. This is the time of day when bellies rumble loudest, and the crew starts thinking about something sweet. Yes, even the most rugged voyagers had a sweet tooth, and they satisfied it with some surprisingly clever solutions. Let's start with the most obvious source: fruit. Ripe bananas, juicy papayas, and sweet guavas were packed aboard whenever possible. But here's the catch: they don't last long. After a few days at sea, most soft fruits turn into mushy puddles of regret. That's why the Polynesians got smart about preparation. They didn't just eat fruit raw, they dried it, mashed it, and even fermented it into long-lasting, calorie-dense treats. Bananas, for example, could be sun-dried into chewy, leathery strips that resembled something between fruit jerky and prehistoric candy. These dried banana slices, packed in woven leaf bundles, became compact and energy-rich snacks for the journey ahead. They were often layered with grated coconut, giving you a delightful mix of sweetness and texture. Imagine trail mix, but tropical, and no suspicious chocolate chunks melting in your pocket. One fringe example of island ingenuity. Breadfruit fudge. Not real fudge, obviously, but a kind of sticky, sweet paste made by slow roasting overripe breadfruit until it caramelized into a rich, toffee-like consistency. It wasn't standard fare, but some accounts suggest it was a prized treat, saved for celebrations or special rituals. Your ancestors may not have had Nutella, but they knew how to coax sweetness out of the starchiest plants. Of course, no discussion of ancient Pacific sweets would be complete without coconut. Sweet, tender coconut meat was often grated and mixed with other ingredients to form energy balls or dense cakes. In some regions, coconut syrup, boiled from sap, acted like maple syrup, drizzled over mashed fruit or root vegetables for a special meal. Think of it as nature's caramel drizzle, and yes, there were drinks too. Naturally sweet coconut water provided both hydration and sugar, while some islands made a rudimentary form of fruit wine by fermenting mashed bananas or pineapple with wild yeast. It wasn't exactly a vintage Cabernet, but it offered a little celebration after a long day of paddling. Here's a quirky detail: in some oral traditions, chiefs or high-ranking voyagers were gifted the sweetest or ripest fruits, often presented in ceremonial bowls carved from hardwood. These bowls weren't just functional, they were symbols of prestige. Sweetness, in many ways, was a form of honor, but sweetness didn't only come from fruit. Polynesians also chewed on sugarcane, long stalks peeled with sharp shells or teeth. It was like nature's lollipop. You'd bite down, release the sugary juice, then spit out the fibrous pulp. It's not refined sugar, but when your palate's been chewing on dried fish and taro for days, a sugarcane stalk feels like a party in your mouth. Historians still argue whether certain regional desserts, like the famous hopia, a coconut milk jelly, originated during the pre-voyaging era or developed later with outside influence. Some say ingredients like arrowroot were used as early thickeners, while others believe the refined versions only came with colonial contact. But simpler versions, sweetened with fruit pulp or coconut sap, likely existed long before European ships hit the horizon. These sweet foods weren't just about flavor. They served practical roles, offering quick energy boosts, calming irritable stomachs, and even lifting the crew's spirits. When your canoe's been pounded by waves for days and your muscles ache from paddling, a bite of dried banana with coconut feels like a hug from the universe. The tricky part: rationing. You can't just gorge on all the sweet stuff the first week. You'd get sticky fingers, hyper kids, and a serious sugar crash, not ideal on a 2,000-mile voyage. So sweets were often saved for moments of high morale need or ceremonial breaks. Kind of like an ancient, "you've earned this energy" bar, some cultures also believed sweet foods had spiritual properties, serving as offerings to the gods or ancestral spirits. In these moments, food wasn't just sustenance, it was a bridge between the physical and spiritual world. Imagine biting into a sun-dried banana roll and feeling like you're part of something timeless. A quiet moment where the universe nods back at you. You also notice something interesting: the way people smile more when there's sweet food involved. Even the toughest warriors soften a bit as they pass around a wrapped bundle of dried guava paste. It's a small joy, but it matters. In a canoe with no privacy, little comfort, and constant exposure, a taste of something sweet becomes a form of medicine for the body and the soul. One final surprise. Sometimes sweetness came from unexpected places, like the sap of certain trees, boiled and thickened into a kind of syrup. Or even the nectar of tropical flowers, sucked straight from the bloom like a hummingbird. It wasn't common, and you had to know exactly what you were doing, but it added yet another dimension to the flavor profile of life at sea.so. As the stars blink into view and the last rays of sun warm your face, you find yourself chewing on a piece of dried banana, savoring its dense sweetness. It's not just food. It's celebration, memory, tradition, and a quiet promise that tomorrow, despite the miles ahead, you'll still find moments of joy.